Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I've got 3 stories for you, 1 from NuclearRevenge, 2 from ProRevenge. Before we start, make sure you check out my website CanadianRob.com where you can get your hands on an absolutely adorable KCC Carmen Chameleon complete with cookies. It's adorable and there's 6 different colors there for you to choose from. Check them out on my website CanadianRob.com. On to today's stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Oreo Soul. You stole from me? I can do much worse. I'm currently traveling through Europe and I just got robbed by one of my hostel roommates. Here's how it all started. First, I arrived at the hostel and after checking in, I realized that the latch on my locker was broken. I had a padlock, but since the latch was broken, I had no way to actually lock my locker. I went and reported this to the reception, and they said that they would get maintenance to check it out. I'm over a month into my Europe trip, and I've had great roommates so far. So despite the locker still not locking, I figured it wouldn't be so bad. On the second day, I left the hostel around 11 a.m. and did not return until around 6 p.m. When I got back, I instantly noticed my stuff had been gone through, since zippers were left open, Ziploc bags unzipped, and other stuff misplaced. I quickly go through my stuff to check if anything was stolen. Everything was still there. However, when I checked my wallet, it was a different story. In my wallet, I had Brazilian reais and euros, and what a coincidence, all my euros were gone, but my Brazilian reais were still there. Luckily, I only lost around 100 euros, because I had another compartment in my bag where I had much more cash. I quickly went to reception and reported the incident, and the staff took the matter very seriously. But since it was cash, it was basically impossible for me to get that money back. I had my suspicions on who the culprit was because my other roommates have mentioned having problems with this one guy we'll call Bob for the past week. He was extremely rude, would come home drunk every night, starts drinking at 10 a.m., pisses all over the toilet seat, left water trails all throughout the dorm area, smoked in the room, and was all around just a menace. I was also pretty close with the others, so it was pretty easy to rule them out as I didn't think they would steal from me. For clarification, the dorm was a 6-bed, so there was me and 5 other roommates. After having my cash robbed, I knew I wasn't going to leave without having my locker locked. So me and one of my roommates helped me find a way to lock it, and we found that if we lift up the locker, we were able to line it up with a part of the bed where we could stick a lock through. Then, me and the 3 other roommates set a trap by placing a €5 bill under a pillow positioned in a place where it's hidden, but still obviously visible. We then go down and hang around for a bit. When we get back, Bob is laying face down in his top bunk bed, and there's a random person on the bed under mine. I'm a top bunk bed across the room from Bob. Originally, I thought that the random guy was one of Bob's friends, but it turns out the 4th roommate checked out, and the random guy was new. When we get back, you guessed it, the €5 bill was missing, but that's not all. I went to open my locker and my keys were not working on my padlock. I then realized that a broken piece of a key was in my padlock. At this point, I was able to rule out any potential cleaning staff stealing from me, and if it wasn't obvious enough, I knew it was Bob. At this point, we're all talking about the situation, and I look over at Bob and he's pretending to sleep face down in his bed. His head was slightly turned so he could look down onto the situation when he opened his eyes. At this point, I went down to the reception, and after I told the manager this, combined with everything else that we already told him, it was finally enough reasoning for them to be able to kick him out. So one of the staff members comes up and walks up to the sleeping Bob and asks to talk with him outside of the room. He pretends to wake up and immediately says he didn't do anything. After several back and forth between the two, he finally complies. At this point, the NuclearRevenge occurs. While he's out of the room, I realized that I had a split chance to get revenge before Bob gets kicked out and I never see him again. I realized that there was no way I was going to get the cash back, so I counted it as a loss and began looking for ways to get even. On his bed, he had his laptop, which was plugged in and charging. I grabbed the laptop, opened it, and laid the screen side down. I then held the bottom side in place and began pulling the screen part upwards until I heard it snap. That's right, I snapped his laptop in half. But that's not all. We're just getting started. I looked through the rest of his stuff. He also didn't use a lock, and half of his belongings were spread across the entire dorm. This man was a mess. I looked through his stuff and I'm able to find one of those card wallets in the back pocket of his pants. Unfortunately, there was no cash. However, there was a debit card and some other card, not exactly sure what it was since I glanced quickly at it. I grabbed the cards and snapped both of them in half. I then slipped the cards back in his bag. I continued looking for stuff and found a nice looking watch and a toothbrush. I picked up the toothbrush, snapped it in half, and pocketed the watch. At this point, one of the staff members walks in and asks us all to leave while Bob packs up his stuff. We all comply and my roommates head down to the lobby, but I had other plans. I left the hostel and walked 15 to 20 minutes to the river, and you probably guessed where this is going. I got his watch and chucked it from the bridge into the river. At this point, I began walking back and feel satisfied about the revenge I was able to get, but a little disappointed I couldn't see his reaction. Well, this is where things get interesting. As I'm walking back, I make a turn onto this long, narrow street where my hostel is on, and out of all odds, I see him walking in the same direction towards our hostel. He doesn't notice I'm behind him, but I'm just awkwardly walking behind him. As we're walking, he lets out a loud F and what sounded like a sigh of defeat. Eventually, he reaches our hostel, which is situated on the right of the direction we were walking. However, he doesn't turn right and instead turns left into this tiny gas station type of shop that's selling a bunch of wine, beers, and other alcohols. As I approach my hostel, before turning right, I glance to the left and see him trying to buy some alcohol. He doesn't notice me, so I turn my head and continue walking to the right into our hostel. Inside, at the front of our hostel, are these long stairs where you walk straight for a while, then once you reach the top, you do a full 180 and climb the rest of the steps to reach the second floor. As I reach the first step of the stairs, I take another glance behind me, and not to sound cliche, but just like a movie, Bob is standing outside the shop staring at me with a blank stare and a look of defeat. I continue walking, and as I'm about to do the 180 turn to climb the rest of the stairs, I give one last cold glance back at him, and at that moment, by the look on his face, he knew that I effed up his crap, and I knew he stole from me. It was the most satisfying thing ever, and I will gladly pay 100 euros to witness that moment again. P.S. Bob didn't report to the staff that his laptop or anything else was broken, which gives me further proof, if it wasn't obvious already, that it was him. Because if he really was innocent, then why wouldn't he bother to report any of this stuff? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called SecureCorner2096. It says, "You indulged in a little vigilante justice. However, if you had been caught, you would have been in much more trouble than Bob, because you caused more damage. Better to leave it to the police or karma." OP responded to this one and said, "I agree this could have ended much worse than it did, but what did it for me was the fact that he went back and tried to get into my locker again, even after I put the lock on. Once again, I don't know if he snapped the key in the lock as pettiness, or if he really was dumb enough to try and steal from me again. But either way, he took me for a fool. I doubt the police would have arrested him or given me my money back due to no security cameras in the room and a lack of proof, which is why I took matters into my own hands. I hate people like this, because when they do this type of stuff and come across someone like me who doesn't like to be made a fool, it just leads to a lose-lose situation. Sure, I caused more damage to him than he did to me, but at the end of the day, I'm still down 100 euros. OP, I know you got your revenge, but again, the commenter is actually correct, because if this guy had called the cops on you, well, You damaged his laptop, which is going to be more than 100 euros. I think in this case, I probably wouldn't have done the damaging things myself, but heck yeah, I probably would have taken that watch. Just something small to inconvenience them, and bonus marks if it was something sentimental. Yeah, I'm a butthole, but that's just me, so take it or leave it. This story comes to us from UOA Oldie. Don't antagonize your lawyer while you're selling your company. Title is a bit dramatic. The revenge is tame compared to what I have read as a lurker so far. But it is the most satisfactory thing I have done so far, given that this happened outside the US where labor laws are, at best, guidelines. I have left out several details. My apologies for formatting and wording if it's unfamiliar to where you are from. I was an in-house lawyer in a multinational company that sold software. I specifically joined this relatively lesser-known company to learn more about compliance. The company was listed on the stock exchange, meaning more compliance work. I highlighted this specifically as one of the reasons for seeking out a change. I discovered it was filled with senior citizens, not an age thing, when I joined. Basically, a company full of old-timers who are there purely because they're close to the company's owners. As part of the onboarding experience, I had to sit through sermons of how they changed the industry and how they know this and that. This meant I had 3 different bosses. One senior guy who was the fixer, I'll call him Senior Guy 1 for convenience. No one really knew what he did, but he got a cabin to himself. Another was an ex-senior management guy who got a gig from the owner to negotiate tech contracts, Senior Guy 2. I highlight this because this ex-senior management guy asked me, "What's a EULA?" Another was my reporting manager, with whom I was expected to work on a day-to-day basis, Senior Guy 3. 1 month after joining, I was told that the company was going private through a sale to another entity. I was shocked, but I had loans to pay, so I continued. For some reason, I was senior enough for them to handle this independently. This meant I worked through nights to complete tasks that a law firm would ordinarily do. I also worked on the definitive agreement that was in use for the company to be sold. This will become important later. By the 3rd month, I had decided the role wasn't what was advertised, and that I was essentially cheap labor for M&A. Buyers were from another city and planned to have their office there. I was not keen on moving. I read between the lines and started lining up interviews. Things went south quickly. Old-timers were unhappy that I was looking for a job because that would mean they're answerable to owners or worse, have to do the work themselves. Cue the harassment, which really solidified my resolve to leave. All my complaints about Senior Guy 1 and 2 to Senior Guy 3 were met with typical management talk. He sympathized and badmouthed them for burdening the company that he tolerates only because they're closer to the owner. Senior Guy 2 started countering all my remarks and comments on drafting on email. Even minor agreement points required discussion. If it was his mistake, then we had a call. If not, then he made sure to document it. If I raised a point, I was being rigid. However, if Senior Guy 2 raised the point, it suddenly made commercial sense. This wasn't my first rodeo. I really didn't care about proving a point because I wanted out as soon as possible. Any pushback fights are going to be on deaf ears because, from where I am, labor laws are, at best, recommendations unless you're unionized. The only option is to leave. I was pissed and tired of being pushed over, but I wondered if it was just me angry at the whole situation and finding faults. I had an opportunity to test my theory. So, in one of the contracts that we were drafting, I made some comments and sent them to Senior Guy 2. As expected, he countered with verbal suggestions on the phone, which didn't make sense, obviously. However, because he is senior, I had to do the song and dance to explain the points. So I arranged for the call, explained to him, and documented this on email, attributing each verbal recommendation, time of the call, and the decisions suggested by him. Then I sent this back to him for approval. However, this time I CC'd my boss, Senior Guy 3, and asked for his approval on recommendations. Surprisingly, this practice was entirely new to them. Both of them were pissed at me. Senior Guy 2 and 3 were not happy. Senior Guy 2 was being questioned for the first time on email, and Senior Guy 3 couldn't ignore my email as the head of my department. Unsurprisingly, I got a single line non-answer from Senior Guy 3, basically asking me to discuss this with Senior Guy 2, followed by a verbally heated instruction to just do what Senior Guy 2 wants and not bother him. Now, I was sure that this wasn't going to work for me in the short term or the long term, so I resigned and gave my notice period of 1 month, since I was on probation. Senior Guy 3 was pissed because he thought the notice period was for 3 months and the sale of the company was expected to close in 1 to 2 months. Cue the 1-month harassment that typically follows in any toxic work environment after you resign. On the last working day, I walked up to Senior Guy 3's cabin and did the obligatory thank you communication. He basically told me that I'm picking a huge fight, and he will see that I never get employed in the industry again. He also told me that he's not going to pay me my full and final settlement of dues and a relieving letter, a huge deal in India to get to your next job. Employers hold off on these as blackmail for troublesome employees. His tone implied that there is very little I could do because they were all senior guys, and they been there done that. I wasn't the first disgruntled employee for him. I said my goodbyes. I got IT to confirm I have returned the company assets and CC'd my personal email. However, I was pissed as well at the whole ordeal and had made up my mind not to show this on my CV. Revenge starts here. I call it my 1-2 shot. Shot 1. Once I left, I spoke with my friend and decided to serve a legal notice detailing the ordeal and treatment meted out to me. Ordinarily, the legal notice barely makes a difference, as the management is usually thick-skinned about it. However, the legal notice was also sent to the owners, not just the company. This wasn't really required, but I did it anyways. Turns out, many directors were pissed at Senior Guy 1, 2, and 3, but were just quiet, just waiting to sell this company out. My act of involving the owners meant the entire board, including outside directors, mandatory for listed entities. This turned into a festival of explanations by all three in front of the owners. From what I hear, they all had to personally take leave to meet the owners as shareholders and explain themselves as naughty kids. Needless to say, everyone in the company was talking about it. I waited for 1 month to see if the notice had any effects aside from them being chided like kids. Expectedly, I got no response, but I knew from the grapevine that they now had to spend on a law firm to reply to me because shareholders were aware of this information. I had made my point, but now I wanted more. I really didn't want to drag it because I was also looking for jobs and had loans to pay. However, their template management response, this time with HR copied, basically implied that since I had left without notice, they were evaluating all options, including considering me AWOL. Senior Guy 2 basically threatened me that he will not pay me my dues or my relieving letter evidencing service, and implied that there is very little I can do about it. Petty that I am, I made plans to get both. Shot 2. Since I had access to the definitive agreement and remembered huge details about it, having worked with law firms through the agreement in detail, 1. I was aware of who stays and goes. I made sure to speak to those who were going to be let go. Cue mass resignations and missed deadlines. 2. I knew the specific approvals that would trigger because of the transaction. So I spoke to the authority who would approve this transaction as a disgruntled employee. The authority made their own inquiries, the owners got spooked. It was definitely not serious enough to scare them into thinking that the deal won't get approved, but the mere fact that a government authority was calling them meant they now had to deal with the authority, which would have never happened if it wasn't for me. Result: 1. Buyer used this as a low-value bargaining chip, citing bad employee experience and resignation of several key members on key projects. 2. I got my dues and relieving letter evidencing service within 48 hours of shot 2. 3. Company got gossip for years on how the management was dumb enough to mess with a lawyer. including a sermon from owners on how not to piss off employees when they're trying to sell the company. 4. Senior guy 1 and 2 were left red-faced, but survived because of old ties. However, their contracts were not renewed. 5. Senior guy 3 who threatened me became a consultant after the company was sold. So I just want to get this story straight. The company messed around with their in-house lawyer thinking that nothing would come of it. Excuse me. This guy's a lawyer. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. You effed around and found out because you treated your lawyer like crap. One thing I'm not quite understanding from this one is why you would give a month's notice and then work it out completely. Okay, I understand that notice is a thing that happens and it's a nice thing to do for companies, but if a company's treating you like crap and you don't want to put them on your resume, so you really don't care about them being in your rearview mirror, why would you give them notice? If I'm not under contract that requires a notice period, I'm walking in and saying, hey, it's been real, but you can go F yourself and I'm out of here. I'm really in a mood today. This story comes to us from Mint Condition 77. Deliberately deplete my prepaid phone balance? You will pay for it 1,000 times over. I went to middle school in the early 2010s, right before smartphones really took off. I got my first phone right before starting 6th grade. It was a slide phone with a pay-as-you-go plan that cost 10 cents per minute for calls and per text message sent or received. Worse yet, sending or receiving photos cost 25 cents each. It was very expensive, and my parents only gave me $100 a year for this. If I exceeded the amount, I had to cover the rest with my limited birthday and Christmas money I had. Fortunately, most of my friends were good about helping me preserve the balance. They would call, and I'd let the call drop, but immediately call back on a landline so it wouldn't count as a call. And they'd email me or message me on Skype for most things. Everything was good until Derek joined the group in 7th grade. At first, we thought he was funny, but we quickly got fed up with him as he was very unpleasant and exhibited many antisocial behaviors. He started drama within the friend group and also caused issues between us and other kids outside of the group. He was manipulative and always played the victim when others rightfully called him out on his crap. And he knew how to charm parents, so getting rid of him was easier said than done. He was the one friend who didn't respect my phone situation. He very frequently texted me dumb memes, even though I told him multiple times to just email or Skype them to me instead, since picture text messages cost 25 cents each. Unfortunately, blocking phone numbers was a feature that was unavailable for this pay-as-you-go plan, so there was nothing I could do as he spammed my phone. One day, he got mad at me for some reason and spammed my phone with memes. He must have sent me over 100 lolcats over text. He kept sending them until I lost service since my phone balance was depleted. I had lost the $40 remaining in my account as a result. I was extremely pissed and demanded that he pay me the $40 he had cost me, and he refused and said it wasn't his problem. I got home from school really upset and told my dad about the situation, expecting him to go and tear Derek's mother a new one and demand the money. But my dad said that it wasn't worth the battle. I even asked him about a small claims court, but he said that not all battles are worth fighting, and that the effort wasn't worth $40. He took me to the carrier's store and loaded $50 onto the phone. The carrier changed my phone number, and they managed to block Derek's number. They had initially said that blocking phone numbers wasn't possible with this plan, but my dad insisted and would not leave the store until they did it. I was extremely paranoid about my phone number being leaked and other kids spamming it to F with me. Fortunately, my parents got iPhones that summer and got me one too, and the new family plan had an unlimited text plan. Nonetheless, I was pissed at the $40 he essentially stole from me out of malice. Fortunately, not too long after, there was a big blowout between Derek and the rest of the friend group at the end of the school year, and we permanently kicked him out of the group. He was an outcast the following year in 8th grade. Nobody was tolerating his crap anymore, and he changed schools the year after, and we never heard from him again. Fast forward to a few years ago, I was back home for a few months between graduating college and starting a new job on the other side of the country. I went out to some garage sales one Saturday morning, and I ended up at Derek's house. I recognized his mother, but I don't think she recognized me. I guess glasses and a beard is all you need. I noticed some Pokemon napkins out for sale, and when I picked them up to look at them, Derek's mom said that her son had been obsessed with Pokemon for his whole life, and that she was tired of Pokemon stuff occupying her home for so many years. I said that these napkins were for my younger cousin who was really into Pokemon, and asked if she had any more Pokemon stuff. She said she didn't know people were still into that, and that there were a few boxes in the attic with her son's old stuff. She actually took me inside the house, which I never imagined I'd set foot inside in ever again, and let me climb up the attic ladder and take down several large boxes to look through. The first one had Christmas ornaments in it and other junk, but I freaked out inside when she opened a box jam-packed with Pokemon video games in the original boxes, though I kept my cool on the outside. The whole reason I had agreed to go inside in the first place was because I was holding out hope of this exact scenario happening. See, I knew Derek was obsessed with Pokemon. Our friend group liked Pokemon back in the day, even when other kids thought it wasn't cool. But Derek was on a whole different level. He bragged about his Pokemon collection all the time. At the time, he had every single main series game in the original box, and in mint condition, as he always had to add in. I went to his house once, and he was showing me his collection. He yelled at me for touching one of the games. Nobody was allowed to touch them except him. He had many older Nintendo games in excellent condition, but Pokemon was his favorite. He had a couple of incidents with his mom, damaging or throwing away his things. It wasn't out of malice, but just ignorance, as she didn't think the games or collectibles had any value. Fast forward into the present day. I was thinking about this when I asked his mother if she had any other Pokemon stuff. She ended up bringing out the motherlode. We opened all of the boxes she had me bring down. Within the boxes, there was the beloved collection of Pokemon games, all very well preserved, as well as several Nintendo consoles, hundreds of games, 24 binders full of Pokemon cards, and there was also a box of many Lego sets with the original boxes and everything, with many old Star Wars sets. When I saw Jango Fett, I knew I struck gold. I told her that I liked old Legos as well, and asked her how much for the 5 boxes of games, cards, and Lego sets, and she thought for a second and said $100 a box, or $400 for all 5. I told her I would take it all, and hauled butt to get to an ATM. I loaded the 5 boxes into my dad's truck and immediately drove home. I knew there was potentially tens of thousands of dollars of goods here. This was the score of a lifetime, and I finally felt vindicated for the $40 Derek had taken from me all those years ago. I ended up giving all the stuff to my uncle, who's a hobbyist eBay reseller. He offered to sell it all. He was willing to go through the effort and sell everything individually. And despite my insistence, he said he wouldn't take more than a 10% cut off the profits after all fees and taxes. We went through and logged every single item along with the estimated value, and the total of the whole lot was about $40,000. $40,000 was a poetic number, since this was 1,000 times the value of what Derek stole from me all those years ago. My uncle sold most of the lot before the end of the summer and ended up writing me a check. Though it was considerably less than $40,000, it was still a life-changing amount of money for me. I was able to pay off my remaining student loans and put the rest towards a down payment on a new car. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Technical Lobster. It says, "Marvelous. I just wanted to know Derek's reaction." OP responded to this one and said, "Yeah, I can only imagine how that interaction went down. I imagine mom would have been initially excited to tell Derek that she just got $400 selling his old stuff that was just collecting dust in the attic, only for him to explode on her for practically giving away what I'm assuming is the majority of his net worth." As for the comments feeling bad for her, I don't at all. She was very pleasant to deal with at the garage sale, but she was awful back when we were in middle school. She always downplayed and excused Derek's behavior. He could do no wrong. On more than one occasion, she complained to the other parents that we were bullying her son when we got fed up and called him out on his crap. There's a good chance I've permanently damaged their relationship, as I imagine he will resent her for this forever. Wow, I'm honestly not sure how I feel on this one. OP, you were a kid back then, and kids do some dumb crap, you know, like sending a bunch of text messages to somebody. You, on the other hand, when you were older and an adult and should know better, took advantage of this guy's mother to get the stuff out of the house. I mean, I'm on the fence for this one. It's pretty bad, but it's also epic at the same time. So let's leave it to the viewers and listeners. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments down below.